reporting on the games you love by people who love to game. The MMO Reporter Network.
You, my friend, are listening to the Happy Hearthstone. This show is brought to you by Doghouse Systems, who make some of the best gaming PCs on the planet. If you want all the benefits of building your own computer but have no clue where to start, go ahead and let our friends take care of you. Check them out at doghousesystems.com and use the code MMO Reporter for a free 128GB solid-state drive upgrade. And by Audible, the best audiobook program in existence. If you have any kind of commute or just wish you read more, I promise you this, Audible is the solution. Go to audibletrial.com/MMO Reporter to download a free audiobook today. Hello and welcome to episode 94 of the Happy Hearthstone podcast, the longest running Hearthstone podcast in the history of space and time and cards. I'm your host, Andrew Brown, and this week, hoo boy, do we have a show for you. We are going to talk all about getting to Legend, and I have decided to shake it up a little bit because we've not only got one great co-host on this show today, we've got two! And you didn't have to pay anything else for that add-on. But it's free anyway, so it doesn't matter. But joining me today is a good friend of the show who was here for our Ungoro reviews. You guys will surely remember Steve, a.k.a. Wicked Good. What's going on, man?
I am excited to hijack the podcast and talk about every card in Mean Streets of Gadgetzan in excruciating detail instead of like, oh,
I
no.
don't...
That wasn't I didn't tell you about that?
Oh, we've already done that, actually. And you and I certainly don't need another 6-hour marathon of talking about every single card.
No, I would like to be able to speak tomorrow. Thank you very much.
That takes
but I'm happy to be.
Like
I'm very happy to be back, and I'm excited. I am as excited to be back as I am about being able to share the stage with your other hosts. So.
Absolutely. Without further ado, you guys know him from Coin Concede. You might also know him from 1600 Dust, or practically every other Hearthstone podcast in existence. But we've got Ridiculous Hat on the show. What's going on, Hat?
Hey, guys. Yeah, it's just like Steve. I have been looking forward to this since we first met at First Dad Joke. And it's been we have, I think, 4 or 5 Discords in common now. And yeah, it's kind of... Earlier before the show, we were talking about a news item. We're like, which Discord did we all see that in today?
I think
so.
It was
it's nice to be able to make that. Yeah, it's nice to be able to make that live action and kind of interact in real life about a topic that's near and dear to both of our hearts.
Yeah, and it's nice. It's nice for me in Discord too, because I'm sometimes a little bit self-conscious, but I know that if there's a Hearthstone Discord, there's going to be at least one person that I know within 5 minutes of me joining. So it's very easy for me to jump in at that point.
I don't think it's even fair to. I don't think it's fair to call it notifications that you have on. It's like hyper notifications or something like that. Is that right?
It's kind of a willingness to deprioritize everything that's not responding to an internet argument is both an asset and a liability for the past multiple decades of my life.
Probably not good in your relationship, but maybe other things. Yeah. It's a good thing.
I'm going to plead the Fifth Amendment on that one.
In Hearthstone, someone is always wrong on the internet, so it's very easy to be able to find time for that.
Absolutely. Well, Steve's been on the show before. If for some reason you missed those episodes, you really missed out. So, but Hat, you haven't been on the show before. So, for anyone who's not familiar with you, give us the rundown on why you're so ridiculous and Hattie and all that.
Yes. Well, I'll touch on probably not those exact specifics, but who I am in general.
It's fine. Okay.
Yeah. So, I am a former Magic the Gathering quasi-pro, is how I'm going to put it. A Magic the Gathering addict, as many of us are, and, a game addict in general, but specifically small, expensive pieces of cardboard or their digital equivalents have spoken to my soul for nearly 2 decades now. Good Lord.
That's a long time.
Disheartening to think about. Yeah. It's since I was playing with Arabian Nights cards at summer camp, I've been playing Magic.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah.
I thought I got in early, and Arabian Nights was even before my time, so wow.
Wow.
Yeah. It's I mean, I was playing, when you're young and you play Magic the Gathering, it's not the kind of defined metagame you have now. It's like, ooh, I have a blue deck.
Yeah.
It plays a lot of blue guys. So that was kind of my introduction to this world, and I've always played a lot of games, of course, as many of us on this sort of form of entertainment are. But as I got older, Magic is expensive, time-consuming, and busy on the weekends. And I got a job about 10 years ago working for a movie theater company, which means nights, weekends, and holidays are just straight out. So after I kind of dissociated myself with Magic a little bit because I was just unable to be good enough at it to want to continue playing it, and we'll come back to that notion, because I based a lot of my self-worth on who I was as how good my most recent tournament was. You know, I was young and impetuous and so on and so forth. But as I focused more on my work life, I still wanted something to do when I got home that scratched the same itch. And Hearthstone came out, and it's much more convenient for small, bite-sized chunks of gaming. It scratches a lot of the same itches. It's really very similar in how it operates, but it bends to the time that I have available. And it's a lot more approachable, accessible, and an order of magnitude cheaper, which is kind of terrifying if you think about it. So I started playing the game, got into it, and of course I am hopelessly Twitter addicted. And as I stated earlier, I just really like arguing and talking and discussing. As I've gotten older, it's been more about discussing, less about arguing, because it's no longer self-righteous. And it's been more about who can I connect with that also plays this game, because the best part of most of the games I play is the community, the people around it, the social environment. Yeah. And Hearthstone has a lot of these micro communities of people that get together in a really positive fashion. And I found myself first in the 1600 Dust community. I came on to do Know Your Role 2015, where we talk about a class. I talked about Warlock because Life Tap is fantastic. I got myself embroiled in that social atmosphere, and then I started streaming a little bit, tweeting at everybody, and then Cinder asked me to be on Coin Concede because Cora had to go be a rock star, you know, and they had this amazing 4-host environment, but then Cora went to go host all of Blizzard's tournament events, and Cinder's like, hey, Cora's too awesome. You look like someone that's slightly less awesome and more available. Do you want to come be in the podcast? Note that I'm taking dramatic license with what he said.
Obviously.
So, yes. So he brought me on the show. It's been a rocket ride ever since, and I've really enjoyed my part of that now. And then I like podcasting so much, I've guested on everyone that will have me, and here we are.
Yeah. And you guys just do a great job covering the pro scene, talking Dexplanations. I mean, I certainly am not privy to a lot of what's going on in the esports world, but I feel like I'm at least in the know because of what you guys provide every week. And Cinder is just like, he's a god of just knowing and being able to break down matches and stuff like that. And he does it in such a digestible way that I always really appreciate that part as well. But very cool.
Yeah.
Well, we're really excited to have you on the show, Hat. Really, I mentioned in the kind of pre-show thing that I recorded last week that I had a huge thing happen, which is the reason why I'm happy, and that's that I finally hit Legend for the very first time. So I have that dirty brown card back that for some reason is just so desirable. And I can parade that around basically. But because of that, we really wanted to talk about what it takes to get to Legend and give you guys some really accessible tools for how to do it. I know we got a lot of people who listen to the show who, man, you're casual, you enjoy the game, you may not be able to put inordinate amounts of time into it in order to hit Legend all the time or be pro or anything like that, but you enjoy playing, you'd like to get there one day but haven't quite gotten there. And we want to give you some tips that will help you. And Steve and I are kind of the everyman. We represent you, the listener, because we've only hit it once. You know, we kind of got on a lucky streak, put in a lot of extra hours, and finally got there. Hat, on the other hand, has hit Legend how many times?
16.
11 billion.
Only 16? Yeah. Man. So Hat...
It's been every month for the past year, plus a few intermittent ones before that.
That's nice. Okay, very cool. So Hat was actually a pretty severe amount of encouragement for both Steve and I through the This Time Legend Discord with Felons Chosen. And he just knows it a little bit more pointedly. When you can replicate something like that over many periods of time, that obviously just gives you a little more credibility. So I think the three of us are going to have we'll certainly have a lot of fun, but hopefully we'll be able to give you some really good tools that'll help you be able to not make your pursuit a dream, but make it reality. So it really doesn't take much else to say to say why I'm happy than hitting Legend. For those of you who are interested, you can track back on my Twitter feed at Andrew's Living and find the deck I was using and stuff like that. It was a version of Murloc Paladin that I had put just an inordinate amount of games into that month. And honestly, I'm also very happy that I hit Legend because it's allowed me to really take a step back and sort of detox from Hearthstone. I've been so try-hard for so long that honestly, there have been other games that I've just really, really wanted to get into but haven't been able to find the time because I've been really trying to devote to hit this goal. So I've been playing more Heroes of the Storm and Overwatch this past week than in a lot of time. And Ukulele I've been getting into, which is from the makers of Banjo-Kazooie, and is just silly amounts of fun and takes me back to days of yore when I would basically stay up all night trying to get to 100% completion. So it's just been a lot of fun to be able to kind of step back and be able to just play Hearthstone when I really want to and for fun. And I've been having a lot of fun trying out some weird Kazakis priest decks and standard and stuff like that. So it's been a really good time for me. But enough of my blabbering. Steve, I want to hear why you're happy, man.
Oh, no. We're not done yet. No. You're not getting off that easily because I was spectating you while this whole thing was going on. I actually got a message from Andrew, final boss alert in all caps.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And Blister Guy and I neither of us wanted to say anything because I know what it's like in that, once you're up at the final boss, and I didn't want anybody talking to me. And neither of us wanted to distract you, so we were basically like Statler and Waldorf over in his Discord. And I want to ask you about the final boss when you got to Legend, because we were watching it, and it was quite possibly one of the strangest quest rogue games that I've ever seen. And especially because you had gotten up to a final boss, you dropped down a couple games, you clawed your way back up, and then you get to this quest rogue who was doing. I remember I said to Blister Guy at one point, I'm not sure what this rogue is doing, and his response was, I'm pretty sure hard drugs. So...
That's the only reasonable thing. So to put some context for you guys, to be honest, that last stretch from 1 to Legend, so those last 5 stars to get there, I played up against some people who were making some pretty hard misplays, and not in the way of like self-righteous, man, I know this game so well, like some pretty obvious things, and none of them were worse than this final boss, quote unquote. So they pulled a Light in the Darkness out of a Swashbuckler, which they were playing, like you said, Quest Rogue. So Light in the Darkness is that 2-mana paladin spell that gives you you get to discover a minion and give it +1/+1. Later on in the game, in fact, the turn before, I think I clenched it, they played a Preparation, and then they played a Silverback Patriarch, which they got off of the Light in the Darkness. And then that was it. That was their play.
What?
So exactly. What? So the prep was... It literally did nothing. And the fact that Silverback Patriarch was the best card that they could have picked off, like, I'm trying to picture what the other, like, maybe a Doomsayer was the other. Even that would have been better because I was playing a very board-heavy game. It was weird.
I don't understand.
It was so, and honestly, like, I won that game, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself... I pictured that so much differently, like so much differently. I would make this key play that just, brought me into it, and I'm sitting there staring at a monkey 1/4 with taunts. I'm glad you bring it up because it certainly was absurd and not what I expected at that level. But and by the way, it's important to note also that player was not a low Legend player.
No, that was a rank 1 player.
Yeah, that was somebody who was trying to get to Legend also. Like, it would make a little more sense if they were just kind of throwing games with weird decks, but, yeah.
It ends not with a bang, but with a whimper.
Hey, but it doesn't matter if you... Like my one of the gym, I guess, teachers in college, when I had to do a swim test, doesn't matter if you swim or you doggy paddle or you just let the tide take you from one end of the pool to the other. It just matters that you get there.
That you get there, absolutely, and I certainly did, just in a very bizarre way. So if anyone's interested,
I'm so happy for you though, because I honestly, man. Like, I felt a little bit like guilty when I came on the show having hit Legend, knowing how hard you'd worked. And I just really wanted that for you so badly. So I'm so happy that you were able to get there.
Well, and it's really, I know that we blabbered on about it, and I've heard you say this so many times as well, but like this time Legend movement in the Valence Chosen Discord has been such a source of encouragement. And I think all of us who spend any amount of time in there have wanted it so badly for one another, which we certainly didn't expect. But you feel like these people who, are just shouting out, hey, you can do it, or hey, man, just try this little tweak, or let me jump in and watch some games. Maybe I can help you out. It just means a lot, right? I mean, I have to shout out to my boy Watchman, who also got there as well, just a few days behind me. He's another one that I'm just like, I feel like he and I have been try-harding for so long, and we finally made it, and it feels good. But certainly hitting your goals in any way, whether that's, rank 15 or, getting your 500 wins or something like that, it always feels good. So I'm definitely thankful to kind of have that in the back pocket and be able to keep going from there. So
yeah, I mean, I would say it's not a coincidence that I've been trying to get Legend for a year, and the month that this time Legend started and Hat and Blister Guy joined up, I'll tell you, Hat, like I really do attribute some of that to you and to Ray, because I'd been trying for so long, and I think that having people to bounce things off of, and even just having like people cheering for you at mile like 23 of the marathon, it makes such a big difference. It really does. Yeah. So I'm saying publicly on a podcast in front of God and country, thank you for helping me get over to the finish line.
Absolutely.
Of course. Well, and you guys should both be really proud of the effort you put in. The community is a huge part. It's why I'm happy most days, if I'm being honest. Like, not the only reason, but a really solid reason. Because if you look at the community around the game that we play, and you think about it, we all have lives. I'm the only one of the three of us that doesn't have kids. Yeah. We all have jobs. We all have stuff that we do when we can. And so it's very easy for a game to be one of the few leisure pursuits that we find time for, but it's also, if that game becomes a source of stress, right? Something that we get burned out on, something that we're trying to achieve just for us and we're not able to get there, it can very easily turn into something that detracts from your life instead of adds to it. So what really makes sense about the community aspect is that instead of basing your self-worth and your esteem on the game, you base it on your impact to others and others' impact on you. You base it on your contribution to the community. It kind of takes the barbs out of the game a little bit. Yeah, it doesn't hurt as bad when you lose. Feels better when you win. It feels even better when you help somebody else win. So this time Legend community, among all the other Discords that have started cross-pollinating and talking to each other and all the people that know each other through other people, you look at the people that achieve Legend. You got you guys, you have WoW.Ben, you have Navalis, you have a bunch of people in there, Watchmen, that all were able to get there. It's not a coincidence that it happened to be at the same time, but really this growth and incredible convalescence of this community and these communities together is really what makes the game more than a game. Because Hearthstone, I don't know about you all, it's the only game I have time to play and the only game I play. I don't buy games anymore because they sit in my Steam account and I never open them.
Right.
So
I still buy them, but they sit in my Steam account and I never open them. So
yeah,
Dude,
well, I mean,
after so many humble bundles,
sale.
I mean, I've got about 5 million, I think, that are just still waiting for me. But
I mean, if it's $1, I'll buy it for $1. But this is the game that I play. It's probably 40 hours a month still, 30 to 40 hours a month.
Yeah.
And that's what we do. So being able to give it meaning outside of the gameplay and being able to use that meaning outside of the gameplay to make the gameplay more enjoyable or rather less not enjoyable, both are really important to kind of manage the mental state.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. Well, okay, so I said I'm happy because I hit Legend. Hat's happy because of his community. Steve, come on, man. What's got you jolly today? I
am happy because I am getting my first vacation in about 4 months, and tomorrow is my first day of vacation.
Whoa.
I am so excited.
Boy.
I've been working a lot of hours, and I am just looking forward to, playing Zelda with my kids a little bit, just getting to sleep in. I am also happy because I hit rank 5 for the month tonight with a ridiculous Yogg Control Priest.
I looked at that list. It's crazy.
I will tell you, I wanted to play Control Priest since before Standard, and it just never kind of worked out because either I didn't have light bombs or it just wasn't good. And I have no idea if this deck is actually good or not. I've been kind of tweaking it. I took Mr. Yagut's Control Priest. I've been merging it with some things from Titan's Yogg Priest and kind of coming up with a list that works for me. And I'm really, really having a ton of fun with it. I mean, anything that has Yogg. Yogg is my, my second bay next to Yashiraj, who I want Blister Guy to craft, and he refuses to. But I'm having a ton of fun with that deck, and I went straight from like 9 to 5 in like a day. So
nice.
I don't know if that's gonna take me to Legend this month. It may or may not, but I'm looking forward to playing a lot of that deck because Priest is so much fun right now. So
and it's been really good against all the Burn Mage that's been out there too. I mean, that's Burn Mage's worst nightmare because they just want you to.
Yeah, I mean it's fantastic against Mage because they Alex you like, oh, that's nice, Priest of the Feast, coin, Shadow Word Death, Power Word Shield. Okay, fine, let's go, let's start over. So it's so much fun, and I had a game against an aggro druid today where they played a Raven on 1, I passed. They played Power of the Wild on 2, I Potion of Madness 1 into the other. They play a Fledgling on 3, I paint it, and they concede right away. So it's like, okay, I turn 3 kill with Priest, let's go.
Dude, Potion of Madness will light me up so fast if I'm doing aggro druid or that Murloc Paladin. That was my worst enemy, actually.
Yeah,
that card, man. It's whenever I played Quest Rogue and someone took my Igneous and popped it, I was just like,
that's my favorite. That is
can
my
I go
favorite.
to the next game now?
Yeah. That's my favorite. Either popping it or painting it. Like I live off of the Tears of Quest Rogues. That is fantastic.
Yeah.
No offense, of course, to present company accepted. But
I don't think I believe Quest Rogue as it exists is probably good for the metagame and bad for the game itself.
Yeah.
So you're not offending me by saying screw that deck.
Yeah, I think we've
fair.
I think we've both started off that conversation on like opposite ends of the spectrum, and I think we both kind of landed at that same place in the middle. That it's good for the meta, but it's bad for the game. So, but
yep.
I have no problem with taking them down. So, or dirty aggro decks, quote unquote.
I'm still waiting to see if they end up nerfing that to like a 4/4 or something. I saw somebody on Reddit had like 9 copies of it and is just waiting for it to get nerfed so they can get full dust for it.
Yeah,
but
not with this deck. But I have once completed the quest as a priest. That's
impressive.
Yeah, which was
entirely too impressive.
Because Curious Glimmerroot will give you any card that started in their deck, not that's currently in their deck. So
and that got you the quest.
So it gave me the quest, and then I got a Shadow Step at one point. They vanished, and I don't remember what the whole. It's kind of like a car crash. Like which way were you going? But at some point I had finished the quest. I didn't win that game, but I kind of won in my heart. So.
Yeah. See, I've never completed the quest as a different class, but I have mana bound it, and that was just as much fun to play it for 0 the next turn.
Oh yeah, that's it's not as good as counterspelling it, but it's like the next best thing.
Yeah.
Then you can play the mirror match without or with having a few extra tools in your disperse.
No, I just put up ice block and go face.
Yeah, that works too.
Yeah.
You call that a knife?
Awesome.
This is a knife.
Yeah.
Well, we got to get moving.
Yeah.
We got some news to hit real quick before we jump into just how to hit Legends. So a few things real quick. I'll let you guys know. You probably have already seen this, but there's a patch that hit Hearthstone that is really just an overarching quality of life thing. The big thing was that they added deck sharing into the game, which is pretty cool. It's a little bit funky, but it works well. So now you can generate this long code that you can share with people either on Twitter, online, whatever you want, and they'll be able to automatically make that deck in client. So if you have any of those codes copied to your clipboard, when you open up the My Collection screen, it'll notice that you have that on your clipboard, and it says, do you want to make a deck from this? You say yes, it'll auto-populate it. And any cards that you don't have, it'll give you suggestions, kind of like how deck recipes work. It's a really neat function. I think they still have a ways to make it look really pretty, but it's certainly functional. I really like it. It sure beats, having to flip between 2 windows and, okay, is this card in there? No. Is this one? Yeah. And go back and forth. So. And then the other big thing that they added was the quests with friends. So they've had a couple of events so far where you were able to fulfill any quests that you have with friends. Those were just week-long things. They got so much feedback that it was good that they've decided to make it a permanent feature. So just about any quest that you have in the game, minus a few like when you start out, like play against the innkeeper, stuff like that. But all the normal ones you get on a daily basis, like play 40 or 30 warlock cards, or play 75 murlocs, or whatever you might have. You can do all of those in games with friends, which is just fantastic. And then gold stacking. Somebody else is going to have to talk about this because I honestly don't know what that is.
That's when you build a deck with one gold copy and one non-gold copy. It only takes up one slot now.
Yes, and that, again, quality of life. But, man, people have been so against that for so long. Did that always annoy you, Hat?
This shouldn't matter as much as it does, but it matters a lot. Because when you looked at screenshots, if you wanted to build a deck in the client, if you didn't want to use a third-party deck tracker, and you had one gold and one non-gold, it just looked worse and took up more space, and you had to scroll sometimes.
Yeah.
And we know, of course, Hearthstone players have a problem with scrolling. It's why it took so long to get the extra 9 deck slots. So, instead, it makes it look so much cleaner, and it's part of the deck sharing. It's so much better on mobile, especially. All of this is way better on mobile. Because if you wanted to build a deck on mobile, you saw on a website before, you had to either remember it or Alt-Tab or switch back and forth and risk the app closing. And if you want to take a screenshot of a mobile deck list, which now you don't even have to, but you would have to scroll, and if you had one gold and one non-gold, we're talking 4 screenshots for one deck. So it just the visual quality of life improvement here. It's a small thing, but it shows that they prioritize the user experience.
Yeah. I mean, I had a whole workflow of like opening up the screenshot from like Hearthstone top decks, saving it as a picture, opening up the Photos app, turning my phone sideways, quitting out, going to Hearthstone, and then going into the multitasking so that I could still see the picture
for the things we love.
So I could still see the image of the screenshot, but not actually quit out of the app, and that's how I would add decks into the client before this. So this is way better.
It sounds like a version of the Mousetrap board game. Like if you hit this marble on this pail, it'll activate the hammer.
There was an old woman who swallowed a fly, but yeah, it's. The only thing is that it would be nice if the codes were a little bit shorter, just to make them easier to share on Twitter. But like that's like nitpicking at this point. It's still a huge improvement, and it's so much fun just to put in a deck and watch all the cards like auto add themselves to the client. And that's like addictive to do. I just added a few decks. I wasn't even planning on playing them. I just added them just to see them like populate. It's fun. It's like something. I feel kind
of like Mickey on Fantasia. Dun,
yeah.
Dun, 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 dun. Something like that.
I heard that in my head before you started singing it.
It was perfect, right?
I mean, these are small things that probably should have existed beforehand, but we were so used to the crappy way things were. Like, we were eating garbage for breakfast every day, and then they finally gave us a bowl of Cheerios, and we're like, this is delicious. But it's just really not garbage for breakfast anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a lot of empathy for them because they didn't plan for this game to be as big as it is, and I'm sure that they have a full housing crisis full of technical debt in that client that they're trying to code around. So anything they can do to help things out is appreciated. And we know they work hard. So, some people get on them for not doing enough. And I think that they're doing the best they can with what they have. So,
Agreed.
All right, Hat, you had some really sad news come across. I know, like I said earlier, you guys kind of do esports on your show. You'll probably talk about this more on the episode, but wanted you to kind of shout this out for us.
Yeah, well, so don't think for a second that anyone is the esports genius besides Cinder, because he's unbelievably good at his job. But One Nation of Gamers, which is a big esports tournament organizer and host, they had Hearthstone majors for years. They closed down 3 days ago. So if you've ever seen ONOG or ONOG, however you want to call it, they had an event at the last couple of PAXs. They had major tournaments all around the globe, and they closed down a few days ago. So just kind of sad news.
Yeah, I mean,
not sure really on the details.
And there aren't that many majors either. So that's and especially in North America, I mean, that's basically, other than the DreamHacks, that's pretty much the only majors that are in North America that aren't sponsored by Blizzard. So that's a big loss in terms of the North American tournament scene.
Yeah, you're right. The Hearthstone tournament scene in North America is unusually anemic. There's just not that much besides the HCTs, and now the DreamHacks are starting to pick up. Last year there was one. This year there are
3,
two?
I think.
Well, there's one in Canada, so USC. There's 3.
Well,
North America in general.
Yeah. Well, there's Austin, Denver, and Atlanta, right? Aren't there? Hearthstone
There's Denver.
tournaments?
That's right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. So there's one in Canada as well. So there's 4 in the continent. But 4 tournaments a year plus Blizzard, it's still not a big number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the presence at PAX cannot be underestimated. Like I've this year was the only year I haven't gone to PAX East, but I went the year before, and they took up a significant amount of floor space, and they were showing Hearthstone on giant screens right next to all of the other major esports like League of Legends and everything else. So, I mean, they were doing something to get competitive Hearthstone in front of people who wouldn't have otherwise seen it by being there. So that's kind of a big deal too, and hopefully somebody else will be able to fill in that role. But that's a big loss in terms of just like getting Hearthstone in front of people as a competitive esport.
Yeah, and they were big advocates as well for things like travel visas for esports athletes that, if you were a physical athlete, it'd be easier to get, but if you were a digital athlete, it wasn't the sort of thing that is yet to be recognized quite the same way. So it's hopefully someone will step up both in a social sense and a tournament organization sense, because I agree that they had more value than just hosting their tournaments.
That's good. For more information, check out the latest episode of Coin Concede.
Yay.
And Steve, you actually put some predictions on my radar that I had totally missed. Tell us about the rumors that are circulating.
Yeah, so just today, as we're recording this, there are starting to be some rumors about the next expansion, and apparently it's going to have something to do with Arthas, because Blizzard has trademarked Return of the Lich King, and also the domain has been registered, and there's some other tidbits around the lore that I don't really know because I'm not a big WoW person, but apparently like the last couple of ranked carbacks that have been announced are the places that Arthas visited in order, and someone's been able to data mine an Ice Crown image from the last patch. So a lot of times once there's enough smoke like this, it's generally pretty on point, and we should be getting an announcement pretty soon, because if you figure that they're going to be doing 3 expansions, they released and they're going to make some sort of an announcement at BlizzCon, they'd have to do something halfway in between, which would be August. If they're going to be doing that and they have about a month of lead up, then it's lining up that they're probably going to make some sort of an announcement at the HCC Championships, would be my guess. So it's about time that we'd be starting to see this stuff, because they usually can't keep this stuff completely quiet ahead of the announcement.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. I don't know much WoW lore, but lots of ice, obviously. And this is a place kind of similar to Karazhan, where it's like a location that they sort of want to revisit,
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what they do with it. And I hope we don't see the freeze mechanic get overused, because freeze mage doesn't need too much else right now.
Yeah.
Maybe?
But also it's worth mentioning, this is going to be the first expansion that's going to have the single player content baked into it. So it would make sense that it would make sense that it would be based on a WoW raid. It's for the first time, because they probably started that design before they made that decision. So
I'm excited to see what they do with that.
Yeah.
Because we've only heard that they want to do more PvE content, but it'll be cool to see what they get at there. Well, cool. All right. Well, let's get to the getting while the getting is good, because you want to get to Legend, and we have got some tips for you. I want to give you guys an overview of sort of what to expect as we're talking about this. Like I said earlier, Steve and I have only done this one time, and I know that enough of our listeners are casual enough that if you haven't hit it yet, there's probably a good chance that getting it one time is really what you want to do. You want to get that card back, be able to say that you've hit Legend or that you're a Legend player, whatever you want. And so a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about, these will be transferable to every player. We'll be talking about mindsets, patterns to playing, stuff like that. So, but for us who are everymen, this is going to take an investment like you haven't yet before, right? Getting to Legend is hard. It takes time. It takes practice. I think it's the top 0.25% of players each month. If it were easy for anybody to hit that, then everybody would. It wouldn't be top 0.25%. It'd be the top 50% or something like that. So in order to get there, it's going to take a lot of training, a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot out of you, really. Wouldn't you say, Hat?
Well, So Legend, if you hit rank 15 last month and you say, okay, this month I'm going to hit Legend, it's a bit like saying, okay, I bought my first house, my next place is going to be the penthouse suite at Columbus Circle in Manhattan. It's
Dang.
Yeah.
It's not a realistic expectation if you've struggled but achieved a lower milestone. Legend is meant to be unobtainable for a lot of people, and I don't want this to discourage you from trying, whoever you are listening out there, but it's not a realistic goal for the vast majority of players that play Hearthstone, and it is an achievement that requires dedication, it requires learning, just like Andrew has said. It's not what everyone should be striving to do with the game. If you hit rank 5 and you want to make that extra push, then sure, but if you have difficulty getting into those single digits, then what we talk about will be applicable at lower tiers of the ladder, right? It's the sort of thing that the general idea here, and we'll talk about mindset a lot, is to be better today than you were yesterday, get a little bit better at the game every day, and if you want to commit the time and investment, you can get there, or at least you can make a good push, but it's make sure your goal aligns with what you're looking for from the game. If you're looking to enjoy yourself and pushing hard and being that kind of competitive, you don't enjoy it, this is not the push for you. And feel free to keep doing what you're doing, because ultimately any goal is there for fun, right? It's there to enjoy yourself. If you're making a push and you're not enjoying it, take your foot off the gas. It's okay to say, you know what, this isn't for me.
Yeah, and I think that the analogy I made earlier to a marathon is really a good one, because it's kind of the same thing. Not that I've run a marathon, but I work with a number of people who have, and I've been around them, and it's like, anyone can run, right? You can run for a period of time, but running a marathon specifically takes a training regimen, and it takes you being in a particular amount of shape to do that. Now, anyone can get into that shape, but it's not something that you're just going to go and do, right? You need to be mindfully applying yourself to that and improving on a day-to-day basis to the point where you're running a 5K and then you're running a 10K and then you're running a half marathon, and you wouldn't just go and just like try to run 26 miles, you die, right? Like, so
that would be really not fun.
It would not end well for you. The people who are running marathons, like, they do it consistently, and a lot of people do it from all walks of life, and anyone really can, but they're doing it, they're training specifically for that. And Legend is the same thing. You need to be, playing the game in a way that is going to help you improve to the point where you're going to get to Legend. And you also need to be taking into account a lot of factors that, and accounting for them and playing around them or playing with them that you might not do if you're just playing casually, or you're just playing to get your rank 15 chest or your rank 10 chest or your rank 5 chest.
Absolutely. And as we launch into this, there's a quote I want to give you guys from Thomas Jefferson. That's one that I've really used in my life a lot, and I think it's super applicable to this, especially if you haven't hit Legend before. He said, if you want something you have never had, you must be willing to do something you have never done. No. If you haven't gotten to Legend yet, there's some things that are going to need to be in place that haven't been there yet. And for some of you, you might be doing all the right things and it just hasn't been the right time. But for a lot of us, there's a deck tracking here or a coaching session here, or something that you need to really take your play to the next level. So I want to encourage you guys to really, just take all of this in. If there's something that kind of hits you and you say, I don't know that I really need that, like, don't just shove it off to the side so quickly. Really think about it. Try what we say. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, that's fine. But we really want you to get this. We want you to be able to say that you've made it to Legend if that's something that you want. And we really think that with the right steps, with the right equipment, the right tool belt, as it were, you can do it. You really can. So, Steve, I want you to just jump into this conversation with us and lead us into the ways of Legend.
Yeah, so I think that what you need to do if you're getting into a Legend mentality is you need to understand, first of all, it's going to be a time commitment. It's not going to happen instantaneously. When you look at the streamers who are online, who are getting Legend the first couple days of the month, or the people who are like racing to Legend in 36 hours, those are people who are playing Hearthstone professionally for the most part. Either they're streaming or they're playing in tournaments professionally, and that's their job, right? They're going to get to Legend so that they can start playing around with the decks and stuff like that. So you need to kind of keep your expectations in check that it's going to take you longer than that. And you need to both have a good understanding of the game. you need to be able to approach the game from a competitive perspective, as opposed to just from a the way you might just approach a pickup game. And at the end of the day, once you have everything in place, when you're fighting with everybody else between 5 and Legend at the end of the day, most of those people are probably all around the same skill level, and sometimes things are just going to line up, and it's just a matter of putting yourself in a position to win as much as you can, as consistently as you can, and taking advantage of those bits of luck when you get them, and not getting discouraged by the pieces of luck that go against you. And eventually, if you keep pressing the button enough in the right mindset, you will get there given enough time.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And mindset is almost all the factors that keep people from hitting Legend the first time are mental and emotional. And Steve, you actually talked about this on Disruption a bit with Georgia, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I was actually just listening back to that today. So one of my co-hosts on Disruption, which is the podcast that I host on Relay FM, which I'll give you the link at the end of the show if you're interested. But one of my co-hosts, Georgia Dow, is a professional psychotherapist, and she also was a competitive. She was competitive in martial arts, I believe, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, if I remember correctly, and like high level competitive, like national competitions in Canada type of thing. And we were talking about this in terms of like just some of the mental, how you keep yourself centered, really, because like ladder anxiety is real. It's going to hit you at some point, and it's a matter of how you overcome that and how you quiet the voice in your head that's telling you that something's going to go wrong, and power through that and just play the game the best that you can, and kind of trusting yourself. And I can put a link to the show notes to that episode as well. That was right after I hit Legend, and we talked about it for the first 10 minutes of the episode. Please feel free to listen to the rest of it, because I would appreciate it. But she had some really good advice from that, just in terms of like breathing, and a lot of, at that level, she said you're kind of playing against yourself more than you're playing against the opponent, which I kind of felt too. Like at a certain point, you kind of feel like you're just kind of playing solitaire after a while. And you're reacting to things, but it's not about the opponent anymore. It's really just about your skill and your reactions to things, which is a big shift in mindset from, I think, the way a lot of players approach the game.
The emotional roller coaster, and I've said this in multiple channels, but I repeat it again, Blizzard is unbelievably skilled at emotional manipulation and their science of addiction, and it is 100% a science. You think about the people that have gotten hooked on playing WoW 10, 15, 20 years ago, and Hearthstone, they give you a gold star when you win, and they take it away from you when you lose. Yeah. When you win, there's trumpets. When you lose, there's rain clouds. When you rank up, the new number explodes on the screen, and when you lose the rank, it burns away in front of your very eyes. This is all meant to trigger emotional response in you so that you want to play the game more, and you know what? It works every time. Yeah. Combined with the slightly random nature of the game, there's going to be moments where it pulls the heartstrings saying, I'm helpless, but I want to play more. And that's the feeling that you have to fight against almost every time you're playing. Because all these factors of wanting to keep the stars that you've earned and wanting to hoard the victories that you've had keep you from playing more and keep you from being effective when you do. Yeah. So these mental factors are so important to conquer.
Yeah, and I'll add to that because I know one of the things that added to my ladder anxiety was when I got to some place in the ladder that I hadn't been before. Like the first time I hit rank 5, right? Like I wasn't sure I belonged there. Like you get up there on a win streak, especially with the win streaks. Yeah. Like you get up there on a win streak. You just got through a whole string of wins, and you're like, holy cow, I'm up at rank 5. I'm not sure if I can hang here or not. Right?
It's a hit, isn't it?
Yeah, it's scary the first time, and then it's like, okay, am I going to be able to win the next game? Because if I can't win again up here, I might not belong here, right? So that's where you kind of have to put that out of your head. Even if you got there on a win streak, you wouldn't have won all those games with sheer luck alone. Like there's some skill that you're applying there, and you just need to trust your skill to keep carrying you forward. And if you do lose a couple games, trust me, you'll get them back. If you got there once, you will get there again.
And I think it's worth noting that playing against better players is going to make you a better player. Like, I remember in my days as a kid at youth group, as like a 9th grader or something, I would go in and I wanted to play foosball, and these 12th graders would just whoop up on me like ridiculous, you know? And I remember thinking at one point, this is stupid that I keep wanting to play these games with these people who are just insanely better than me. Yeah. But game after game, I started noticing the little tricks that they would do, how they would pass the ball between their players, how they would flick a certain way. And as I started trying those out, I would get there. So even, you know, as you're kind of making your way up, really pay attention to what your opponents are doing also and learn from them, because they can be, you know, the tool for you to take it to the next level as much as internally what you can figure out on your own.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's easy for us to talk about this in the format of a podcast after we've done it. It's very, very difficult to do this in the moment and say, I'm getting my butt kicked, but this is good for me. That's not going to be your reaction.
It takes a level of masochism. Truly.
Yeah.
And even now, right? Like, even having hit Legend, that doesn't mean that I don't have, like, days where I can't buy a win. And I'm sitting at one of the rank floors, like, thank God I can't lose stars anymore, because if I did, I'd be back down at rank 20. And
rank 15 hell. It's a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, they have a term in League of Legends called ELO. I think it's ELO hell, where you end up falling back to a point where, you know, people are just doing weird things and you can't climb back out of it. And that happens at the rank floors too. Like, once you get to a rank floor, you start seeing people playing like Yasharaj ramp druid and like weird stuff that you wouldn't be seeing up above that. And it's just a matter of just playing your game and trusting your skills. But you know, even then, right, you kind of, at that point, it's also knowing when you need to kind of walk away and recenter yourself too. Because there is a point, as much as we say, keep pressing the button, there are times when pressing the button is a bad idea. And usually, and we'll talk about some things that you should be doing just in general in a second, but I know that one of the ways that I can tell if I shouldn't be playing anything else is when I start making snap plays. Like, when I'm not taking my time looking at everything on the board and thinking out my turn, I'm just immediately 5 seconds, card flips into my hand, I've got to play, I hit end turn. I'm not playing my best Hearthstone. I know it. And that doesn't mean that I stop, because even when I'm in the middle of it, it takes effort for me to recognize that. But knowing your tells for when you're not playing well and that you need to take a break is probably one of the most important things you need to learn in order to climb efficiently. Because as much as it is a numbers game and as much as it is you need to get your games in, if those games are games where you are not playing your best, or at least playing well and doing the right things, then you're going to end up doing more harm than good at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Now, you know, you spoke to not playing when you're at your worst. Playing at your best looks a little bit different, obviously. Yeah. But something I really appreciate about whenever you're streaming and talking through your play, you're so good at analyzing what's happening, being able to talk about that. But I also really appreciate, you actually taught me without even knowing, but I watched you so many times talk about what happened during the past game at the end of the game. Can you talk a little bit about that? And for the listener who might want to try that out, how to do it?
So learning mindset is the most important thing to get better, because like I said at the beginning of the show, being better this game than you were last game, playing every game better but learning more, and I can speak to it specifically this past stream that I just did on Friday. I picked up Mr. Yagut's Control Priest. I'm not a priest player, it's by far my worst class, but I picked it up because it looked fun and I wanted to play something interesting, and I went 2-7. Right? That was my win rate with it. So after 9 games, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll play something else. Maybe this isn't for me right now. But after every game, I was looking back and saying, did I use my AoE too early? Did I have understanding as to what I was supposed to kill with my spot removal? Was I applying pressure quickly enough? And a lot of what I'll do is, going into a turn, I try and say which card screws me over. And then after that turn, a lot of times I'll realize which card it was, and then I played right into it. So, you know, I recommend doing that before you hit end turn, but such is life. Yeah. But after the game, figuring out why you won or why you lost, if you can find those pivot points, there are third-party deck trackers that can show you replays, but just think about what happened and say, why did I lose? And really, if you take the mindset of every loss is a lesson and every win is probably a lesson as well, because a lot of what makes a player successful is being able to understand what the opponent's deck is doing and how yours lines up. We'll talk a lot about assigning roles and who's the beatdown and so on and so forth, but understanding how your deck loses is just as important as understanding how your deck wins, because if you know how you lose and you are able to say, I need to not get to this spot and I need to do something differently, that will kind of redirect your energies and help you get a better understanding as to what you should be mulliganing for, which plays you should prioritize early, which removal targets you want to emphasize, when it's a time to start being the aggressor and going face. Knowing those things and understanding your deck is super important for winning.
Yeah. And I think the one thing I will add about in favor of going so far as to review your whole replay, and one of the things that I started doing when I wanted to start climbing, taking climbing seriously, and I don't do it as much now as I should, is that every time I would lose, I would stop, I would open up the replay, and I would watch the replay before I played another game, and figure out just anything I could do better. And sometimes there's literally nothing because RNG is a thing, but it's not as often as a lot of people think it is. Like, even when luck is a factor, it's not. There's usually some decisions that you could have made better in that game that would have helped set you up better for that RNG. And one example is there was a token shaman who I made rage quit with my priest deck yesterday, and I just basically cleared the board every turn, and they couldn't get rid of my minions. But the thing is that they had a Firefly on turn 1. I played something that was, I don't believe, maybe it was a cleric, but I don't think it was. And they used, I didn't play a cleric. I didn't play anything. They just played a Flame Tongue on turn 2 and went face for 3. And it's like, no, that's where you lost the game, was on turn 2. Because if you had that Flame Tongue, you could trade off my minions. But because you did that, I was able to paint it and then start putting minions down that you couldn't answer, and then eventually I snowballed the game. But the problem is that when you're at turn 8 or 9, you may not remember that. And, recency bias is a thing. You're only going to look at the last couple turns and say, oh, well, they got this card off of Shadow Visions, and that's why they won. No, I won because you wasted your Flame Tongue totem. So that's where watching the replay will show you those things as the game goes on, and you can kind of look at them a little bit detached, and then see where you went wrong, and then not do that again.
Yeah, and I think that even as you're actively going through the game, being able to pay attention to a turn where you really can see a few different lines of play, I know that that's always the easiest thing for me to go back to and be able to say, okay, that's the point. I don't feel confident that one of those others was the right play. Maybe I made the correct play based off of what I know, but I know that I could have played it differently at least, and being able to really, just soberly say, okay, I can probably take some of the, the grudge for that game that might have been on me.
Yeah. And when you see those plays, take a screenshot. And then go back and look at it afterwards and see if the decision that you made was the right one, or if you had made a different decision, would it have gone better?
I mean, ultimately, this is creating a mindset where you become a student of the game, and there are lots of different ways to do it. But whatever way you can find that works for you, of being able to learn from your games, other people's games, from your past, your present, your future, whatever you can do to realize that if you are a legend hopeful, you've never hit it before, and you want to make the difference, this is the kind of approach you have to take of learning from what's happened to you in the past, what might happen, what happens to other people, and thinking about the future possibilities. This is the sort of approach you want to take.
Yeah, and this kind of goes into the general advice that whenever you read one of these how to get to legend guides that people say, but it really is true a lot of the time, which is stick to one deck, especially when you're climbing for the first time. And that the reason for that is because you don't learn all of these scenarios when you're constantly changing decks. You're going to learn it when you're playing the same deck over and over again, and you're seeing the same situations over and over again, and then you know instinctively what to do, and you don't need to think about it as much. And that makes a lot of the more complicated decisions easier when you know what you have and you know what your tools are. That doesn't mean that if you're playing Priest in a meta like Karazhan, where Priest is terrible, that you should keep doing it and beating your head against the wall. But what it does mean is that when you have a deck that should have a greater than 50% win rate, or that you generally have a 50% win rate, but you've lost a couple of games, that you don't go and say, well, this deck sucks now, I'm going to change it to something else. You need to go look at
Right.
which by the way,
I'm definitely guilty of that.
Well, I'm the worst. It's a running joke in the Discords that I would totally be interested in that deck if I was not going to, if I was a person who would change decks, not that I am that person. But I'm at my best when I'm playing the same deck over and over again. And sometimes it takes me a long time to find that deck. And that's okay when you're like at the floor and you're just trying a bunch of stuff. But once you start climbing, you really need to look at your stats and see, has the meta shifted? Am I running into a matchup that is just flat out bad for this deck? Or is it that I just happen to either not be playing well or, just get hit by some bad RNG or a combination of the two? And if I stick with it, that'll even itself out and regress to the mean. But I'm instead going to be, reactive to that emotionally and just go play something else, which you don't know as well, and then you're going to have a lower win rate with. It's going to take you longer to climb with.
You have to navigate the emotional Scylla and Charybdis and kind of...
Oof.
Yeah.
Well, you got to break down this list for me, man. I'm sorry.
So it's
People
in
say
the
I use
Odyssey,
big
right?
words.
It's the Odyssey. It's Odysseus navigated between the two terrors. Think of between a rock and a hard place. You have to navigate.
Okay,
You don't want to
okay.
switch too often, but you don't want to not switch enough, right? You don't want to be emotional in the moment, but you don't want to bring a Prius to the drag race and keep driving it because that's the car that you have. You want to make sure that you're picking a deck that has the tools to be competitive, but it's one that lines up with what works for you. So
Right.
there's...
Here's the one thing I'll say, because I know that I've also gotten really agitated by that, by thinking like, man, I'm trying so hard and I'm, almost getting there, but just not quite. And I know that there's this tenderness that has to happen when you get really close, and how do I know when it's too much or when it's not enough and all that kind of stuff. But I just want to encourage you, if that's you and you're feeling aggravated by it, just let it be, Like, just get swept up in the flow. Don't worry about it too much. Don't hyper-analyze it to the point where you're, so upset at yourself that you queued up one more time with that deck that you should have. Just let it be, because the more pressure you can take off of yourself, like, these games will give you enough pressure, right? You don't need to self-inflict any of that more on yourself than is necessary.
Yeah. And I mean, I will say this as someone who has like a medical diagnosis of attention deficit disorder, because this is my struggle. Like I joke about it a lot, but it is like I seek novelty. That's a thing that happens, right? And I hyper focus on this game, which is why I can focus on it. But I also feel the draw a lot of the time for, oh, there's a new control shaman, and I should go try that, even though I know that's a terrible idea. And that's kind of the difference between playing the game to play the game and playing the game competitively. Because if you're just playing the game, to mess around and to have fun, and by the way, nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. This is a game you should have fun. But, knowing that control shaman is probably not a great idea to play right now. But, pushing that aside and sticking with a deck that is working for you, but maybe is not as, flashy, is part of managing the mental state of getting to Legend as well. It's that kind of discipline that you need in order to be able to stick to Legend.
Also, for what it's worth, Hot Form's Elemental Control Shaman is excellent right now.
Don't make me craft Kalamos. I don't want to do it. And
You haven't done Kalamos yet?
I don't have
I would have
Kalamos.
expected you to get it.
Hold
No,
on, Steven Lubitz, of all the people to talk about legendary crafting, peer pressure, and shame, you are not one that can take the moral high ground here. That is not something you can do.
I know. I actually, it's on my list, but I probably will do it soon. But I was waiting for a deck that actually would justify it. So I already have Yashiraj as opposed to some people. So
Yeah,
That's totally
I'll
fair.
tweet the deck list to you.
okay. No, I've seen the deck list. I know it's good. I have a priest deck that I'm sticking with because I am a disciplined Legend player.
I admire your conviction.
I'll probably craft it and play it tonight. Anyway, so we should probably I don't do we want to go through this kind of fundamental stuff we should go through quickly, just that things that you should be doing in game just as a basic, even if you do it as like a checklist for things that you're doing and I don't think we really want to spend a lot of time on this. And, if you go back and listen to some of the back catalog of Hat's excellent podcast, Coin Can See, they do deep dives on a lot of the fundamental strategy topics that are very much worth your while to listen to, especially the beginning episode on tempo versus value that they just put up in the last episode. Plug for Coin Concede. But there are some things that you want to make sure that you're taking your time and thinking through your turn every turn, which means that every turn you're checking to make sure that you don't have lethal before you start making other plays. Like, this is like, even though it sounds stupid, there are so many games that are lost because someone just does not do the addition. And that's the worst way to lose. And the other thing that you need to do is check that your opponent doesn't have lethal, especially when you're playing a control deck. And that includes not just dead on board, but dead to a common source of damage that they're likely to have. Like, if you're playing against a mage and they happen to have a fireball in their hand, or they have 10 mana and they have a pyroblast, are you dead to that? Are you dead to a Jade Lightning from a Shaman? Are you dead to a Consecration from a Paladin? Things like that, or a Blessing at Kings. If there are a couple decks that play those. That also involves knowing the decks, but there are some things that you can just generally work out, that there are cards that are common that those classes will have that you will be dead to on top of what's already on board. And then if they are, depending on how likely it is that they have it, like, have they played a fireball already? How likely it is that they have it? And sometimes you just have to just say, well, if they have it, I lose anyway. But you at least need to kind of take those types of things into consideration before you start playing any cards. Sorry, were you going to say something, Hat, or?
Do that. Yeah, it's if you haven't thought of two plays on your turn and consider what happens with both of them, you're not doing yourself justice as a player. I will say the exception, if you have a green mana worm on turn 1, you should probably play it. But it's outside. Even then, take a second to think about what their next turn could be. If you're against a warrior and you have a turn 1 mana worm, there have been times I've actually held it because they could go coin War Axe, and instead I have the option of going, say, Mana Worm, Cabal, Lackey, Mirror Entity, or something like that. You want to give yourself the opportunity of saying, here's my obvious play. Are there any non-obvious plays? What happens if I make both of them? Then which one is better? Because your snap call is not going to be the same as your best play probably most of the time, and you have 75 seconds a turn. So I have some friends that will literally sit on their hands for 10 seconds, do not allow themselves to touch the mouse, just for 10 seconds every turn. And you know what? They're good players.
Yeah. And you know what really helped me to slow down was, I know it might sound silly, but I started just pretending like I was streaming. And I would literally talk out loud as if millions of people were watching me and just explaining, this is what I'm thinking through.
Yeah.
And it slowed me down so much, and it's still helpful. I'll be talking to myself in an empty room, just because it helps me actually think about what I'm thinking about and what are the things that I think that somebody else might even notice off of this,
Yeah.
Well, and there's a philosophy in computer programming, actually, the rubber ducky solution, where you leave a rubber ducky next to your computer, and when you have a programming problem you can't solve, you explain it to the rubber ducky, and the act of verbalizing it makes you consider it a different way, that frequently you solve your problem as you speak out loud.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. And even then, just kind of forcing yourself to say it out loud will just kind of help you slow down. Even if you aren't going to come to the same solution, at least it makes you go through the process. And that's a lot of it. It's like a batter getting up and getting into a stance and then doing the dance with the bat or whatever to get themselves set up. It's something that you just get yourself into a good habit. And if you're doing things like you're drawing first, right? Like, that's one time, that's a point when I know I need to slow down, is if I find myself drawing last, then I know that I messed up the turn. Like, does it matter, like, 98% of the time? Probably not. But the reason that you draw first is because it can sometimes change your play. And you always want to go into a play with as much information as you can and with minimizing as much randomness as you can. So that's why if you've done things properly, You've gone through your plays. You know what you want to do. You've counted up the mana. Like, if you're a Warlock and you have 2 mana left over, tap first. Because then you can see, okay, does that change anything? No, then I'll do my play. But if it does, sometimes that can make all the difference. And, like, I can't tell you how many times when I was playing Zoo, and Zoo was one of the first decks that I started climbing with seriously, like, I would tap last and then smack myself in the forehead. And I would do it over and over again because I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed sometimes. But, eventually I learned that you need to do that. And it's the same thing with, trying to minimize minimize the number of targets before you play something that has random effects, things like that. Just trying to eke out a little bit of extra percentage on those plays can really make a difference in your win rate.
Yes.
It's good. I agree with everything.
And I guess the last kind of bit that goes with this, and I linked to this article that I think is kind of basic for somebody who's just starting out, but even then it's one that is pretty old, but I like to read it every so often, which is, why am I losing in Hearthstone? And the first thing, the rest of it is kind of basic for anyone who's been playing the game, but it's good to read the first part again, which is about luck, which is just that if you're blaming the game, if you're blaming a random outcome, if you're blaming, if you're blaming like the card that came off a glyph, and this card is stupid, I can't believe this card is there, this card is broken, this is horrible design. You need that's stuff you need to get rid of from your vocabulary, because ultimately things that are going to generate random effects are part of Hearthstone, which is why it's not chess.
Right.
And if you are going to blame that, then that means that you're not looking at your game, and you're not going to improve, which goes back to the central conceit of this whole conversation. So, I think that I could probably talk about this at length, because this is probably like number one with a bullet, the most frequent conversation we have in any of these Discords, is that someone will come in and be complaining about this card X, Y, or Z needs to get rotated out to the Hall of Fame right away. I'm tired of losing to it. And that's fine, but nothing's rotating to the Hall of Fame for another 8 months. So you can either go away from the game for 8 months and see if it gets put out into the Hall of Fame, or you can figure out how to play around it. And yes, maybe the card is broken. It doesn't matter. Everybody's dealing with the same broken cards. Your job as a competitive player is to either figure out how to make it work for you, or figure out how to play around it such that it is not going to affect your win rate.
And ultimately, grinding for legend, if you are a casual or semi-serious or whatever kind of player you call yourself, if you are not one to typically push for legend, you say, okay, I want to do it, what you need to realize is you are now committing to playing Hearthstone on Hearthstone's terms. Because if you want to be competitive, if you want to win and achieve a specific goal, that means you have to make certain compromises as to what you are willing to deal with in the game. If you would typically hit rank 5 and be like, I'm stopping here, I'm tired of seeing Freeze Mage and Quest Rogue and whatever, Pirate Warrior, whatever Boogeyman of the Week, you had that luxury, but that meant you weren't going to progress anymore. If you want to power through that, you are playing Hearthstone on Hearthstone's terms. However the game is right now, you say, I want to be the best at this game as it stands, not I want this to be a different game. And that means understanding of saying, whatever problems the game has right now, I'm going to take them on and I'm going to approach them until you decide either I can push through it or this isn't for me. But if you're committing to make progress, you're saying, however Hearthstone is, warts and all, whatever flaws are going on right now, I want to be a part of it. And you can't cherry pick which parts you get to play.
Yeah. And I think it's fair to note that this isn't an Olympic event where you train and you're able to beat everyone at something, right? Because you are the best. You're Michael Phelps or something like that. This is a game that is based off of two things inherently, and that's strategy and luck. The cards you are dealt, you have no control over other than the mulligan. And then you have to know the strategies and decision-making that it takes to create the best possible outcome for yourself. I think that, this is not Call of Duty where you have to learn to snipe or, actually, I don't know if sniping is even a legitimate thing in Call of Duty anymore. But
sounds plausible.
This game hopefully you still play it because it's fun, and this doesn't take that away from it, but this game is 100% decision making. That's all it is. And you have as much time as your opponent to make a decision based off of what is there. And I think it's what makes this game so fascinating is that, you could watch a million Twitch streams, you could play this game forever, and the next game you play, even without new expansions or something, could be new. There could be a situation that's unlike anything, completely that you've seen before. And that makes it fun, and that makes the decision making more difficult because you have to base it off of what you know and what you can tell, but you're never going to have everything so that you always make 100% the right decision.
Yeah. And I mean, if you really we've had decks like that in the game, and then Patron Warrior got nerfed. So, it's...
that's true.
And even, Pirate Warrior is a very low RNG deck. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You draw the cards. There's draw RNG, but at the end of the day, there aren't very many random effects in a Pirate Warrior deck. It just hits you in the face. And so, right. That's something that, maybe they drew the Reaper on 5, but it's a card game. That's part of the game. So, but I've seen... I've seen, and trust me, I am an expert on salt.
Yes, you are.
A professional.
Anyone on this show today is.
Yeah, and anyone who has listened to my podcast will know that I'm called Salty Steve on that show for a reason. But at the same time, it's if you're gonna start, I've had to talk people down in some of the Discords, Dirty Rat is a poorly designed card. No, it's actually a really well-designed card. It just feels really bad when someone plays it against you, and there's a big difference there. And the design, if that's going to get fixed, that'll get fixed by Blizzard, but that's out of your hands. But the feeling you get when that card gets played against you is completely within your control, and that's what you need to manage when you're grinding to Legend.
And it's worth noting the best players in this game have 65% win rates, which means if they play 3 games, they lose 1 of them. And which means if you are playing the number of games to hit Legend, we'll talk about, but my first month hitting Legend, I played 350 games, which means I lost 120 of them. That's the best.
A lot of losing.
The best players are going to lose over 100 games a month, if not more. That is part of being good, is losing a lot. So be aware, the expectation here is not to learn these things and then stop losing. The game is not solvable. This is not a solvable game. This is an optimizable game, but you cannot solve it. You can get better than you are now. You can make informed decisions, but we had a quote on the last show of Coin Concede from Captain Picard, in character, actual Captain Picard, of, "It is possible to make no mistakes and still lose, and that is life."
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that you really need to accept. And the other thing about a 55 to 60% win rate is, let's say that you have a 60% win rate, which is really, really good for a first-time Legend. That means that for every 6 games you're playing, you're losing 4. And that doesn't mean that you're winning 2 and you're losing 1. Sometimes that means that some of those wins are 5 or 6 in a row, and then you make those wins back up later. Or some of the losses, rather, are 5 or 6 in a row. And that 5 or 6 in a row loss streak feels awful. It feels like you can't win a game.
Yeah.
But yes, 100%.
And that's when you need to be going back to something like a deck tracker or a Tracobot that's tracking your win rate, or you're doing it manually in a spreadsheet or something, so that you can go back to that and remind yourself that, no, I have not completely forgotten how to play the game. I am a good player. I'm having a bad streak. Maybe it's time for me to reevaluate how I'm playing against certain matchups. Maybe there's a new deck that entered the meta that I'm not prepared for. Maybe I just need to take a break, which after losing 3 in a row is probably a good idea anyway, because you're generally going to start getting close to getting tilted at that point, and then you're just going to compound the problem. But remind yourself to look at the stats and look at, is my win rate really dropping? Or did I just hit a bad streak and I just need to get back to it and I'll get better? And
because either are possible and either are okay.
Yeah, and all those things could be possible. Like the first time that I hit the final boss, I ended up I was on a pretty good win streak, and then I came up against someone who was a low rank Legend player who was playing Patron Warrior at the end of the Gadget Sam meta, which it was not a deck that was in the meta. And
Silly.
I was playing Aggro Shaman, and I had no chance. Like that's like the one deck that was gonna crush me, and I lost like 3 or 4 after that. And I eventually went all the way back to I think like either the rank 1 floor, or I went to two in full stars or something like that. And then I said, you know what, I'm gonna go play Zelda with my kid for a while. And
Smart.
Which is a good detox.
and what's frustrating is that, you know, when you have a full-time job and, you know, you have limited time, like the best focus times to ladder are on the weekends for me, because I can do it during the day when I'm not exhausted after a day of work. And I knew that doing that was giving up one of my best ladder days towards the end of the month. And I said, you know what, I'm not doing myself any good. And I'm going to go play Zelda with my kid, I'm going to come back to it, and the next day I hit Legend. Like, no sweat, like 5 games in a row, and just went right up and had no problem. So,
And you'd be amazed what the discipline it takes to actually shut it off when all you want to do is keep going.
yeah.
Like will do
it's
for
awful.
you. It's investing
It was
in
hard.
yourself.
Yeah, it was hard, especially because I had my daughter watching me too, and she had to see me like say, you know what, this isn't happening today, and I shutting it down, and let's go do something else, but it's hard, but you need to have that discipline to be able to do that.
Man, I wish I had that discipline all the time. It's right before the ranked floors came into play. I still hit Legend this month, but I went from rank 1 3 stars to rank 6 4 stars in 2 days.
Yeah,
It's, you know, and that involved a lot of emotional deck switching and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I got back there because in reality the difference between rank 3 or rank 2 and Legend is about one good session. But, you know, it's I always have my own internal tell as whenever I say to myself, if you just think more, you'll win more. I have that internal dialogue, just like you're good at this game. Just sit there and think more. Yeah. That's when I feel that I should stop the game. Sometimes I don't, but that's when I know that I need to walk away. And then the next day I can come back refreshed and like be better at it. Unless if I stayed and tilted down, the tilt doesn't go away quite as quickly, and that's when I can string it over multiple days. And a lot of people will have these bad runs over multiple days where they're just unable to shake it off and leaving before it gets worse. And kind of, taking the hit and the sunk cost and moving on with the day, but not ruining your week is a really important part of winning losing the battle to win the war.
Yeah,
That's when the game has become the master,
Yeah.
and you are its puppet,
Yeah.
and that's just not worth it. It's not.
Like, if you can take one thing away from this entire discussion, it is that the thing that you will say to yourself. We should probably talk about tilt and like what it is and how to avoid it in general, but the one thing that you should never listen to yourself when you say it is, I just need to get one win and then I'll shut it down for the day.
No.
No. Stop. Bad. No. Do not listen to that voice in your head. If you are saying that to yourself, that is the time to shut it down right there. And it is, again, it is really hard, especially when you are someone who, like me, who has limited time in the month to play it, and you know you need to get the games in. But if those games are not going to be good games, you are not doing yourself any favors by continuing to play. Go find something else. Go play Wild. Go play Arena. Go play Gwent.
Do anything.
And then you can be a hipster. But do anything else but go back into ladder
I
at
like
that point.
Gwent.
I do too.
It is good. It is good.
I'm just bashing on Gwent, but I actually think it's a decent game too. But you know, it's gotten a bit of blowback lately. But you know, go do literally anything else but play on ladder where you're trying to ladder at that point, because you're just gonna end up doing more damage to yourself. I mean,
it's good.
So,
we got to wrap up this conversation. I've got a few questions from the community I'd like to ask, but before we get to those, any final thoughts or last, punch in the throat moments that you guys want to hit?
I'll let you go, Hack, because I've been talking a lot.
Yeah, that's weird. Out of character. So
you've met your match, good sir.
Yeah, it's.
Got him.
I'm just basking in the wicked good conversation.
Oh wow.
So it's the. And I grew up in Boston, so I am familiar with the use "wicked" as a positive term.
And ironically, I grew up in Jersey, so I adopted the term. But
yeah,
so we've switched sides basically.
Yeah, so
like two ships passing in the night.
Yes, I made a ship metaphor earlier, and no one caught it. Now you get to make one. That's not fair.
I'm the worst.
Yes, I can agree. So, just in terms of mechanical sense, I will say ABC always be counting. especially if you're playing a Bloodlust or a Mage deck, it's always a good idea to have an idea of lethal, because I miss lethal near daily, and it's embarrassing. So I've started just slowing down and counting every turn. It does make a big difference. What I want to talk about before we change off this topic, because we could go for a while on this, is that setting yourself personal milestones and talking about running the numbers and saying it takes this many games to get there, it takes this many hours to get there. It's important to be aware, but the worst thing that I think you can do for your own mental state is setting it up where you're tracking individual games as a commodity to be hoarded or held. And that saying, if I lose these games because I misplayed, I cost myself time. Visualizing it as a marathon by mapping out the entire route. No, you map out your training regimen and then you start running. Yeah. So setting it up as though I have to eat this entire elephant, no, take a bite and then keep going. It's the idea here that an individual game mattering is invalid. Like I said, the best players, if they play a few hundred games to Legend, they'll lose 100 of them. It's still so many games that are going to get lost. So prioritizing an individual game, yes, you want to play your best. But ladder anxiety is the biggest thing that keeps most people from hitting Legend, especially when they start to lose at high ranks. And in reality, you just have to hit play until you turn orange, as long as you're not tilting and having that negative internal dialogue. But take it a game at a time, and don't worry about when you hit rank 5, when you hit rank 4, when you hit rank 3. If you're at rank 3 and it's the highest you've ever been, if you stop hitting play, you're not going to hit Legend. You literally cannot if you don't hit the play button. So hoarding a game and keeping the spoils of war of that one battle will keep you from claiming a victory in the campaign. Because ultimately, if your goal is to get as far as you can, you have to keep taking that step. You have to keep hitting play. And drawing out the numbers and saying, okay, I need 300 games at this current win rate is just a way to psych yourself out. It's important to be aware of the scope and the scale, but you really don't want to set yourself up of saying, this is the month where I'm going to do it, and I'm going to start off now with 15 games a day, and I'm going to play every day, and like a trainer, it's a game. You have to have some fun with it. You have to focus on the single game you're playing, and drawing it out in front of yourself is just a way to kind of get in your own head ahead of the time.
Yeah,
it's good.
Yeah, I would
Steve?
absolutely agree with that. I think so. I have two things that I'll leave with. One is, if it's your first time, or even if not, use something that is tracking your games. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to have the thing in front of you that's tracking what cards are left in your deck and what cards your opponents played. If that's something you don't want to do, it's something that a lot of people are using, and there's no shame in using it. But if that's something you don't want to do, that's fine. But you should have something that is... Trackobot is the best one for this, that is tracking your games and writing them out somewhere that you can go and review what your statistics are. You cannot improve what you can't measure. And if you're looking at your last few games and then making decisions on that, you're going to make poor decisions. If you can look at the data, which is really only going to be done by something cold and calculated, collecting that for you, and then giving you a number that you can look at, and looking at what your win streaks and your loss streaks look like and what you're losing to, then you can start to improve. So even if you don't want the thing in front of you, and I understand it, but do track your games. That's one.
I agree 100%, and I think looking at 10-game chunks is always what I recommend, because it allows you to track the data without the feeling. And it's possible to lose your last 3 or 4 and still have a 60 or 70% win rate. So it's really important to track and look in small pieces so you can identify what's working, what's not, over a given session.
Yeah. I usually look at my stats over the last 24 hours, which is an option that Trackobot gives you. You can also look at 15 is also a good number, because that's the number of games that fit on a page, and it'll give you the win rate for that 15-game stretch on the Trackobot results. So I really cannot recommend it enough. The other thing that I think is really important is that Legend is the ultimate goal, but it's not the only accomplishment to be proud of. And I think that this is something that really is not said enough, and we probably should have said it at the top, but I'm going to say it here, which is that if you are someone who is quote-unquote only a rank 15 player, stop saying only. Like, if you are someone who is getting to rank 15, you are better than 75% of the people who play ranked. If you can get to rank 10, you are better than 92% of the people who play ranked. If you can get to rank 5, you're better than 98% of the people who play ranked. That is not something to sneeze at. The reason that Legend is seemingly the only goal is because the ranked system the ranks make it seem like the numbers are completely proportional. That there's 20% of the players are from 20 to 15, 20% are from 15 to 10, and so on. That's not how it is. It gets considerably harder, and your skill as a player is like exponentially higher as you climb the ranks, and you should be proud of that. One of the things that I like to do and that I recommend everyone do is in the quest screen, if you hover over your rank, it will tell you what percent of the player base that puts you in, and you should look at that and not at the numbered rank. Like, if you think about it, like, if you're getting to rank 15, that would probably put you in the equivalent of silver. I don't forget if it's silver or gold. I think it would be gold in something like Overwatch or Heroes. I know it's not a complete parallel, but it's a good thing to look at. So, if you're thinking that Legend is Master, then rank 5 would be Diamond, rank 10 would be Platinum, and rank 15 would be Gold. Would you say you were only a gold player, only a diamond player? You wouldn't say that, especially at rank 5. So really be proud of what you've accomplished and make sure to celebrate that. Like, if you are even still listening to us talk about this for an hour and a half, you're probably better than most of the people who play the game, and you should give yourself credit for that, even if you never make it to Legend.
Yeah, and I know that we have a ton of casual players who may even say, I know that Legend is beyond what I'm able to do or what I have time to do. It's not even really what I want. I just want to encourage you to just keep playing the game. I mean, for all of us, we have to keep in mind whether you are super aggressive about your goals or you're just trying to have a good time, like, really remember it's a game.
Yeah.
And be proud of what you have accomplished. Push yourself if you've got the margin to be able to do that. But I totally agree, Steve, that it's too often we're kind of downplaying ourselves, and you are your own worst enemy when it comes to this game. Like I said, it's all decision-making. It's all internal. So Get over that hump, push yourself, bring someone else into it, find a community, get encouraged, and go for it. You can make it. I promise.
Yeah, I mean, we've been kind of, a little bit of tough love through this conversation, but, like, really, if you want to do it and you have the time and you're willing to put yourself in a mindset where you're willing to learn and improve at the game, you can do it. It may take you a long time. It took me a year of getting to rank 5 consistently before I got to Legend. And I think, Andrew, it was longer for you, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
But it's
I don't even know
doable.
how long.
Yeah. But it's doable, and you can do it, but it will take you a long time. It will take you a lot of work, and it may involve you playing aggro shaman when you don't want to.
Oh, God.
Occasionally.
But it's a tough love conversation because Legend is tough. If you want to be an NFL player, you don't use the JV tactics of training. We're having a stark conversation because hitting Legend is a lofty goal that requires training, approach, and commitment. But if you just want to get better and have fun, that is pure the positive conversation. Community is here for you, any community you can find, and it's all about some very good friends I have on Twitter. They generally idle between 20 and 17 every month, and you know what? We see eye to eye. A good victory is a good victory nonetheless. At this point, I will often, my proudest accomplishments, most recently my proudest accomplishment was one game where I beat a quest rogue that had the quest active for... As of turn 5, I beat them on turn 10, and I was Control Paladin. Super proud of that, but it's a single game. In the grand context, it doesn't mean much, but to me, it felt fantastic in the moment. And having those conversations, relating to people, whatever rank you're at, that's whatever makes you feel good, makes you feel good. And the only reason this conversation took the tone it did is because Legend is difficult, and if you want to get in that shape, you have to accept some harsh realities to get there. But you don't need to accept those realities to hit whatever rank is one above the one that you're at now.
Yeah, run a 5K before you run a marathon. If you run a 5K, run a 10K. If you run a 10K, run a half marathon.
Yeah, and if you've never run a marathon, run a color run first.
Yeah, do a couch to 5K.
That's right.
This could be your couch to 5K for Legend. I mean, that's it. Like, you can do it, but you just need to approach it like you're training for something, and not just that it's something that if you just thought more, you'd get there. Because you should think more, but that's not going to get you there by itself.
That's good. Well, let's jump into some questions. I reached out on our Google Plus community and on Twitter to you guys to ask if you had questions specifically about Legend, what it takes, anything like that. And we had several people reach out, so we want to answer these, quickly but efficiently. I guess those are kind of the same thing. Never mind. Alec Roach, I'll take this first one. He asked, is Wild Legend easier than Standard Legend? And if so, Why? And that's kind of, it's a temperamental question based off of what the ladders look like. It is definitely possible at some point that the meta is in a place in Wild that it could be easier. I would argue that it's not. Although today, actually, as we're recording this, the very first Wild edition of the Vicious Syndicate report was released, and they reported that Midrange Paladin had a 56 to 57% win rate across all the games that they were tracking, which is actually pretty high considerably. So if you just look at that number comparatively to their data on Standard, it would say that actually hitting Legend with Midrange Paladin would be easier. Now, granted, that means that you need to know the meta on Wild better. You need to know this deck specifically really well. It isn't just a plug-and-play kind of thing, so it's complicated. I would say that it's really not, just because it's kind of 6 or half dozen as far as you need to understand what decks you're coming up against. You need to understand how your deck plays, and there's not just one clear runner. It's not like back in the days of Undertaker Hunter, where there's just a clear, hey, you just play this and you win most of your games. Would you guys agree with that, real briefly?
So,
I think. Oh, sure, go ahead.
So, it's not easier. It's just different, right? It's
right.
It's not easier to eat a cake instead of a pie if you're eating the whole thing. It's complicated because in Wild, less people are playing it. The metagame is both more fluid and way less defined, but you're also much more likely to play against the same people at the higher ranks more frequently. So you'll find your own pocket of the meta, but it's different decks, it's different environment, it's a lot less predictable, but it's a lot narrower of a band of people that you're going to play against. So I think ultimately you can find different tactics that work in both formats, but I wouldn't say that hitting Legend in any format is easy.
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons that Wild gets the reputation, or has had the reputation, as being easier, because typically most people, last month aside, because they had the Wild tournament qualifier, but in general, most people will focus on Standard, grind in there, and then go into Wild and mess around, and then they have a much easier time climbing. And the reason you have an easier time climbing is because you're at rank 11 in Standard, and you're at rank 23 in Wild. Right? And so you're going to be playing against people who, some of them are probably doing the same thing. They're probably also good, higher ranked players who are just trying it for the first time. But sometimes they're just going to be, people messing around because they're not taking it seriously. But I think once you get above rank 5, it doesn't matter if you're in Wild or Standard. And I think Kenny, Hat's co-host, will tell you this pretty definitively, because he's been trying to climb in Wild for several months now, if I remember correctly. And he's been having the same struggles that most people have going from rank 5 to Legend and Standard. It's not that it's any easier. It's just that when most people are experiencing Wild, they're experiencing it at low ranks, or they're experiencing it late in the month when most people have already hit the floors that they're going to hit. So they're playing against much lower, much lower skill opponents, so they're able to climb more easily. But that kind of has diminishing returns after a point.
It's at least the games are over faster because Ship's Cannon is a card, but it's still it's
true.
You're never gonna get to a point where you need to play a few hundred games and win 2/3 of them, where you're gonna say, "Oh, this is much easier." It's just different. It's a different animal, but it's the same skill set.
Yeah,
totally.
I mean,
agree.
the games aren't shorter. The games aren't shorter for me because that's the one place where I can legitimately play Control Shaman. So the games are never short.
Yes, but for those of you with less masochism, then you can make the game shorter. I mean, it's really, and it's up to you. Some people like those long games for reasons that I can't really understand.
I like
they
playing
are
Yashiraj.
masochists, like we said.
I have my issues,
Don't we all?
So our next question, moving on, from Yellow Dart 3, he asked, so now that you hit Legend, do you feel driven to keep hitting it, or can you relax finally? Steve, I'd love to hear what you have to say. I mean, obviously this is just a preferential question, but what's been your pattern now that you've hit it?
I don't want to say that I'm not driven to hit it, but I think the pressure is off from doing it. Like, it's something that once I've gotten there, I know that I can do it, and it's not something that I could say that I'm... Because, like, before that, I would say the sentence that we all say, which is that if I just had enough time, I would do it. And now that I've actually done it, I know that that's not just me telling myself something to make myself feel better, that that's really the truth. And I would like to get there, but if it doesn't happen some months, it's just not going to happen, and that's okay. There's not the same pressure to do it to get the ugly brown card back to prove that I was able to do that at least once. If it's I know that I can do it. That some months it's going to happen, some months it's not. But the pressure is off a little bit. But that doesn't mean that I don't try hard and that I don't want to get back there. But I'm not putting as much onto it, though. Once you're up at rank 1, the same feelings come back, regardless of whether you have the card back or you don't.
Sure.
Yep.
What about you, Had? I know you've done this many times. What keeps you going to come back to it every month?
The answer to both halves of this question is yes, because I feel way more relaxed about the climb, but I still do it every month, and I still feel driven to do it every month. It took me, honestly, it took about 5 times for the pressure to prove that I could do it consistently to go away. And then after that, it became about doing it with a new deck every time. It became about trying something new, but it was an end goal that I'd achieved enough that it was almost like finishing a book that I started reading or getting through, some other milestone that you set on a regular basis, like a fitness regimen, something like that. It was a way to keep me sharp and engaged with the game. I enjoyed doing it. I wanted to do it, and I very much have a dial into one game and lock in personality where I want to keep playing Hearthstone, and I'm not going to be comfortable with hitting Legend a few times, then be like, okay, I'm done. That's what I want to do now going forward, pretty much every month. And I want to do it a slightly different way each time. So it feels a lot better. The pressure at rank 1 is way, way lower. And I'll be honest, I always found rank 2 harder than rank 1. Rank 1 always felt more like a victory lap because, well, I didn't ever play against Prep Silverback Patriarch, but I did play before the rank floors.
It's a real struggle.
Yeah. Before the rank floors, it was almost always a victory lap against low legend players, parking level legend players, as we called them. Against them, and it was a lot easier to get through, but the pressure definitely feels a lot less, and now the pressure comes on when I'm trying to climb the legend ladder if I ever try and do that, which I usually don't, but I still want to do it on a regular basis, and I feel like a lot of the pro players probably have a more extreme version of the mentality that I have.
That's true. Like I said at the top of the show, honestly, the throttle's way back. I'm having more fun than I ever have. I am trying to fill up all the rest of my golden wins with Priest and Rogue, so hopefully I can get there. But it's a much less stressful climb and a lot of fun. So our last question here comes from James Waddell III from our Google Plus community. He asked, what deck or decks would be best in the current meta to get from 15 to 10? And I know this is probably the number one question that people ask, especially when they're trying to just get to the next floor or something like that, is, man, I feel like I'm just missing the deck to play. Steve, I'll ask you first. What do you think? What's the right way to approach that question, or how have you done that in the past?
So typically, the way that I approach that question is I go to vicioussyndicate.com, I click on Data Reaper Live, I click on Classes Rank Overview, I scroll over to the right, and I play the deck it tells me to play. And it's a little bit glib, but at the end of the day, that's probably, like right now, I'm looking at it and it's saying pretty much for every rank, Token Shaman followed by Murloc Paladin. And I would say that those are two pretty safe picks for pretty much any rank right now. But that's when I don't know what to play, or if I don't know if I'm playing the right deck, then I'll just go there and I'll look at their live tracker and see if I should be playing something else. Then I look at what their recommendation is. That doesn't always mean that that's the deck that you should be playing, because ultimately a deck needs to fit your play style. And if you just can't grok Token Shaman, then or Murloc Paladin, then maybe it's not the best for you. But that's also something to say, getting back to the competitive mentality. If I don't know how to play this deck, maybe I need to learn how to play this deck. If this is the number one with a bullet deck for every level of the meta, then maybe I need to watch some streams, or I need to, go look for some guides and figure out why I'm not playing this deck well, because this is clearly like an overwhelming recommendation for every level of the ladder.
Yeah. Anything to add, Hat?
So I have a long-winded answer to a seemingly simple question, as is on par with this podcast. So this question is complicated. First of all, if you're asking to spoon-feed decks, the ones that I've been playing are Token Shaman, Burn Mage, and Control Paladin, but that's not the answer I'm going to give. Those are just the ones I've been playing. I think they're good. But is 15 to 10 a stretch goal, or is 15 to 10 a comfort level? Different question. If it's a comfort level, play whatever you want. Play something that you
Right.
think is fun. I like the 3 decks I mentioned, but also they're the 3 classes I have that aren't golden yet, so take that with a grain of salt. You can pick decks based on, if it's a stretch goal, do what Steve said. If it's something that you're comfortable with, pick something that interests you that's in line with your play style. And ultimately, learn how to not have the answers spoon-fed to you, but how to find the answer to this. Not saying don't write in with your questions. We appreciate your question. But the best way to grow as a player is to figure out where are the resources I can use to inform my decisions, as opposed to who will give me this information that I can then go to in the future, and they can help me, they can guide me, but they can also prop me up. You want to make sure that you are your own best resource at a certain point.
Yeah, and that's really good advice too, because you want to learn how to fish. You don't want to get a fish, ultimately.
Right.
But at the same time, like, and based on my my recommendation, I'm also looking at rank 6 to 10 that I just cruised through, and Yogg Control Priest is not anywhere on this list. I would be pretty shocked if it was. And so, sometimes you just need to go your own way too. But I think that one of the best things that you can do between 15 and 10 is pick a meta deck and learn how to play it really well. And generally that's the best deck. Like the first decks that I started climbing with were Zoo and Face Hunter. And those were easy decks to play. They were effective in the metas when I was playing them. And you'll learn, like, Token Shaman is actually a really good deck to learn, because you're going to learn a lot about how much to put on the field, how much to hold back, when you just hero power as opposed to playing one of the cards that looks really appealing in your hand, how to position minions correctly so that you're getting the most value out of something like a Flame Tongue Totem, how to count to 30 when you play a Bloodlust. Things like that are things that will help you, that Zoo kind of used to teach you. And Zoo's not really a deck right now. So Token Shaman, even if it's not the best deck for the meta, which it sounds like it is, it will teach you a lot of fundamentals that will pay dividends for you going forward the way that Zoo used to.
100%. It's a deck that is, there's an obvious way to play it and a lot of counterintuitive, way better ways to play it. And the number of times I've had a 2-drop in hand and hit hero power instead, it feels weird every time. But it's correct most of the time, and the deck has. We're going to talk about it a little bit with maybe a little bit of a musical backing, where the deck just does a lot that doesn't seem like it can. It's one of those, it reminds me of the first time I tried playing Miracle Rogue, where I just had all these cards and they didn't do anything, and they played against someone playing Miracle Rogue, and all of their cards worked synergistically together to kill me really easily. If you don't learn how that axis operates, you're not going to be able to fight against it. So that's the kind of, Steve's approach is 100% correct.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good practice in general to play as many of the meta decks as you have the cards for, just so that you know what the thought process is on the other side. That's really helpful, even if you don't end up laddering with it. Even if you just say, I'm going to play it in casual or whatever, I just want to learn this thing. Like, that helps you more than anything else when you're playing against one of those decks on the ladder.
Man, you guys are just dropping bombs left and right. I got nothing.
Boom.
But James, I do hope that you're able to put that in practice. And the only other thing I'll add is watch some pro players. Ask your friends who are playing. If you don't have friends on Battle.net, then find them. I mean, you're in the Google Plus community. It's a great place to just reach out and say, hey, I'm looking for someone around level 15 or level 10 who can help me, get higher. I'm sure somebody will reach out and help you with that. So.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that when you're tracking your replays or sending them someplace like hsreplay.net, like, one of the things you can do is go into the Google Plus community or go into one of these 16,000 Discords that Hat and I are part of and post that replay and say, hey, I lost this game. I don't know why. Can someone take a look and see if there's something I did wrong? And chances are you'll get 3 people and 4 things that you can improve on.
Yeah. And I will say from my forays now in Heroes of the Storm and Overwatch that Hearthstone is probably the least salty game out of the Blizzard ones, as far as what you're exposed to, and granted, if you want to find the salty Hearthstone community, you can find them, right? They are out there.
Yeah.
But
it's called
really leverage. Yeah, exactly. But really leverage the people who are there, and if you're not sure where to go, check out the Discords that we've mentioned already. Check out our Google Plus community, and you'll find those people eventually. So
this is the best one.
The best what?
The best non-salty community?
I'm saying that there are many.
Yeah, well, just judging by the Reddit Hearthstone, I'm amazed that kind of salt hasn't leaked elsewhere. I'm really grateful that it's been quarantined.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you completely.
Yeah.
It is funny to see what's on there, and yet there's so many people like, us on the show who are we're trying to do better and we're trying to support each other, and we know that that's only going to happen when we just kind of give freely and we agree to let the salt end, in our brain, because it still appears from time to time.
Yeah.
All right, we got to wrap up the show here because we've had a great discussion here. I want to give a quick shout out to our iTunes review, which came from Isabella Chapman, 5 stars, and said simply the best, just a great show in general. Stray Dog, add me. I've got a feeling that my good friend Stray Dog actually had a secondary account from which he accessed. But you know what? I like it. 5 stars is the way to go, and appreciate that so much. If you haven't left us a review, would really appreciate that. It helps us in all the search engine optimization and all that stuff, and would love to read it aloud on the show. Man, we got to zoom through that because, Hat, I've asked you to lead us into the promised land of a card of which we would speak for 1 week of time.
The card of the week is Evolve, and it is my understanding I'm required to provide musical backing.
You better.
Okay, so I'm going to sing a stanza from the Beatles' Revolution with slight lyric changes. Forgive me, I am not a karaokeist, but a deal's a deal. Yes. So, you say you want an evolution, well, we all want to change the board. You tell me, I hope it's not a devolution, but I'll kill you with a wisp. That's all you get out of me.
Nice! No, I like it, man. Thank you so much.
That was fantastic.
Surely you guys know this card, but just remind us real quick, Hat, what does Evolve do?
Evolve transforms all of your minions into random minions that cost 1 more. And if you happen to pair it with Doppelgangster, it gives you 3 6-drops. And
holy cow.
I have been incredibly impressed with this card, along with Bloodlust, obviously, and Token Shaman, because it just makes your hero power and all the different dirty little minions you put on the board, it transforms them into legitimate, really powerful, unclearable threats late game. And it just shows the power of Token Shaman. It seems to never run out of cards, and that's what I really like about it. It reminds me very much of Old School Zoo, which is my most played deck in Hearthstone's history.
Yeah, and I think that the Evolve and Bloodlust are the reason that you don't have to drop something onto, that it is correct to play hero power onto, because every card in that deck is a threat. Because all of a sudden you could drop an Evolve, and you have even that is going to be a 2-drop, and as long as it's not a Doomsayer, that's something that all of a sudden is going to be one more thing that your opponent has to deal with all at once. It's really kind of disgusting how well the deck works in the right hands.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean,
and it's just fun to see all the random stuff, and you get some crazy card. You get a Sunwalker, you get an Illidan Stormrage. You get something that's not normally used, but actually really, really good, and it just makes the games fun.
Yeah, 6-drops are really good on average. So I mean, when you drop it with the Doppelgangster, that's a really, really strong turn 6. It's hard to come back from for a lot of decks.
Yeah, well, and 3 totems, a Firefly, and a Bloodlust is 17 damage for 2 cards.
Yeah.
So
not bad. I heard that's pretty good, actually.
It's okay.
Yeah. I mean, you used to have to spend 9 mana to do 14 damage with 2 cards. So.
Never to return again. Well, cool. Well, as we close up the show, I want to remind you guys that we are a proud part of the MMO Reporter Network, which is a collaboration of several different podcasts, all on mission to provide fun and entertaining takes on your favorite games. So if you play World of Warcraft, if you play Lord of the Rings Online, any other MMO really, you got to check out our friends Chris and the gang who are over at MMOreporter.com creating some other great podcasts about those things. And if you'd like to support the Happy Hearthstone and the whole network in general, would love for you to consider hanging out over at patreon.com/MMO Reporter and supporting the show financially. It's a way to just help us grow, get better, and we're doing that together as a family. So would love to have you come and join us there. Been thinking of some neat little incentives, but you can go check out what's there currently, and we'll keep you guys updated on that. And as always, I would personally love to know what you thought of the show and what you'd like to see added to the show for future episodes. And I've said it before, what makes this specific podcast so great is you guys. The community for this show is just big, wide, and deep. And because we have so many different co-hosts who come on the show, share their heart, share something that they love about the game or that they want to help everyone else get better at, that's just what makes it better. So even if you can't be on the show at any point, I would love to get a question from you or just hear what you think. If you're enjoying it so far, I mean, we've been, almost 100 episodes deep. This is a for real legacy here, so we're coming up on a big milestone. I'd love to hear what you're thinking about the show, everything like that. And you can do that the best by emailing me at thehappyhearthstone@gmail.com, or you can contact me on Twitter at AndrewsLiving or the show at thehappyhs. And also, we've mentioned communities and being a part of stuff. The Google Plus Happy Hearthstone community is great. We've got a link in the show notes, or you can just search on Google Plus for Happy Hearthstone. You'll find it. And Twitch on Monday nights, I'm supposed to be over there, and I've been doing a terrible job since moving of actually being there from 6 to 8 Central. If you're interested in watching, I mean, go to twitch.tv/MMO Reporter. And I will be updating you guys on there. You can subscribe to get updates. I'm on there. Chris is on there sometimes with a little Lord of the Rings Online or even Elder Scrolls Online. They've been foraying in there and stuff. So go ahead and just subscribe to that, and you'll get a notification anytime that I jump on. Hey, Steve, remind us where our great people can find great people such as yourself on the great interwebs.
Well, you can listen if you like hearing me talk for multiple hours at a time. You can go listen.
Which who doesn't love that?
Well, anyone outside my family mostly. So you can go listen to the podcast that I do on Relay FM called Disruption, which is a podcast about technology and the way that it affects the way that we live our lives. Among other things, we just had our big WWDC recap where we got to WWDC eventually after discussing a few other important topics like the Babadook. But you can find that over at relay.fm/disruption. You can find me on Twitter at WickedGood, and my Twitch is WickedGoodFM. I've said this before. I'm hopeful now that I'm on vacation this week, I'll have some time to get my setup looked at again, so maybe I can start streaming on a semi-regular and frequent basis, which would be fun. But that's where you can find me over there. Awesome. And Hat, we got to know all of the Hatty things that you do. I don't know why that's the only pun that comes to mind. It's terrible, really, but yes. Just tell us where we can find you.
It's what's the job title? Haberdasher? Is that the one that makes sense?
I like it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Haberdashery. That's a fun word to say.
Yeah, I just like saying it sometimes. So
it is a fun word.
Yes. So you can find me as part of the Coin Concede Collective over on Twitter at Coin Concede, Facebook.com/CoinConcede, Discord.CoinConcede.com, Shop.CoinConcede.com if you want a cool shirt. We stream live on Wednesday nights at 9:30 Eastern-ish, usually closer to 10, but around that time. And we publish our podcast usually Friday nights. Definitely subscribe to us. Please listen. We love your feedback. Come to our Discord. Great, very vibrant community. Yeah. And a lot of the direction of the show we're taking in is community involvement and responding to your questions and comments and inquiries in the show. We have a channel in our Discord, Questions for the Cast, where you ask and we answer. You can also find me personally on Twitter.com/ridiculoushat. I have a large presence there. I stream on Twitch twice a week. That's Monday nights at 11 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Pacific, and Thursday nights at 11:59 p.m. Eastern or 8 p.m. Pacific. 9 p.m. Pacific. I know it's 1 minute off. Shut up. And you can also go into any Hearthstone Discord and type at Ridiculous Hat, and the chances of me being there are substantial.
It's kind of like saying Candyman into the mirror.
Yeah,
sometimes.
or Beetlejuice.
And I'm one to talk because I'm probably right behind you in any of those Discords.
It's the best way to get both of us is just go into any Hearthstone Discord and make a dad joke, and we will both appear to continue the pun thread.
We're summoned as though through dark magic.
Yes.
And you will take it further than it should have gone, but really where it should have been.
I'd argue we take it just far enough, actually. I think we enhance it and make it what it was meant to be.
We are legend level dad jokers, which means we don't stop when we're happy. We stop when it's driven into the ground.
You keep going.
Yeah, I will offer as evidence the makeup thread.
Oh, that was
the makeup cast thread in Hat's Twitter the other day, which is a thing of beauty. No, well, actually, I just made a dad joke about it, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
so
you can't make that up.
That is a dad jokeception.
I didn't even
the
try.
Wheels have
That's how
come
good
off
I am.
a long time ago.
That's how you. That's how you become a legend level dad joker. Is you make those jokes without even trying.
Yeah,
anymore.
that one made me blush.
That's good stuff.
Oh.
Well, Steve, Hat, thank you guys so much for coming on the show, for helping us to hopefully get some really good tools in your belt for how to get to legend. Would love to hear from you guys as you're, getting back up there and really trying hard. And would love to encourage you in any way we can. But for you guys, Steve, Hat, thank you for coming on the show and sharing your love, your knowledge, and your dad jokes.
Thank you for having us.
Anytime. Yeah, thanks so much for letting us chat together for the first time and join and talk about such a great topic with such a great host, can I say?
Yes, this was amazing.
Thanks. I'm blushing. It's always a good time when we're hanging out here, and a lot of that is because of you. I want to thank you specifically for coming, visiting the Happy Hearthstone, and having a little fun with us. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching the video, everybody. Don't forget to check out all the other podcasts at MMOReporter.com or by clicking on any of the links here. And please check out our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MMOReporter. Thanks, everyone, and see you in game.